Hey YouTube, Dosm Rider here with another Dosm's Rambles. I think the lighting's okay in this one without me even switching the light bulb. That's the first thing you want to hear in a Megaranger video. So yeah, I haven't done one of these in a while. I said that I was going to do a Dairanger one for some time, because I watched that quite some time ago. And I had intended on recording Dairanger before we finished Megaranger for our book club. But I just never got around to it, and I kind of wanted to record Megaranger while my thoughts are fresh. I still plan on doing Dairanger. In fact, the wind just blew, sorry. I near guarantee that I will record Dairanger, the Dosm's Rambles, before whatever the next book club thing is. So yeah, I just wanted to do Megaranger first. So, yeah, Megaranger, let's see. This will not be pleasant. So I was pretty excited to start Megaranger. I really, I like the whole motif of it. In Space is my favorite series of Power Rangers. So I was just pretty excited to start it. Way back, a while back, a few years ago, or however many years ago now it is. Actually quite a lot, but when I first started Sentai, Megaranger was one of the ones I first checked out because I kind of sampled a bunch of them, and at the time only 6 episodes were subbed. I didn't know that at the time when I started watching them because I was like, where's 7? And it wasn't there. Cool story, right? But so yeah, and I remember enjoying it at the time when the 6 were out. But the subs came out pretty slow, so I decided, I'll just wait till it's finally done. It finished a while ago, so I was pretty excited to get into it, because I remember at least somewhat enjoying the first episodes, and it's a little bit older than some of the series, or newer rather, than some of the series I have been watching, so I figured it had to have gotten better. And it really didn't. I didn't absolutely hate this show, but I really didn't like it either. I found it to be incredibly boring, to be honest. Like, the first few episodes were pretty okay, like I remember them, the setup was kind of neat, but honestly, kind of like Jetman and Dairanger, I found it to be incredibly lacking in terms of story. The setup, like a lot of them, is very basic, but nothing ever really happened. Like, I feel like this is the story of our book clubs, is with the exception of Dairanger and Dairanger, which had a lot more story, I feel like I'm always waiting for something to happen, and then it never really does. It was just so much filler. It was like every episode practically, like Dairanger, was filler, except instead of revolving around a kid in abnormally tight shorts, it was about some sort of fake relationship misunderstanding. And I just found it to be so boring, and very little happened throughout it. Now there was handfuls of enjoyable episodes, like the Mega Voyager episodes, which I actually didn't pay as much attention to, but those were on the better side. And then there was the episodes where they got the Delta Megazord were okay, or Delta Mega, and I enjoyed the Mega Silver episodes. I thought those were pretty enjoyable, and then the finale episodes were more enjoyable than the rest of the series. But the problem was there was roughly maybe 4 to 5 points between all of this show that stuff actually happened, and by the time something happened, I didn't care. Like, I didn't care about any of the characters, I wasn't really invested in anything, I don't know where I was with that. I wasn't invested in anything so that when something happened, I wasn't glued to my seat and be like, oh man, what's gonna happen? It was like, I acknowledge it was a more entertaining episode, I could pay attention more, and it was more entertaining, but it just wasn't like, normal Sentai where you watch it for a while, and then a big moment happens and you're kind of glued into it, and you're like, oh man, what's gonna happen on the next episode, or how's that gonna happen? It was just... I just couldn't get into it. It's like, it was too little too late by the time they got to stuff that happened. I forgot to mention at the beginning, this is a bit of a spoiler thing. I'm not going to, detail everything, but in order to discuss certain things, there will be spoilers, so if you want to leave now, just go. Alright, I give you a chance. So, the spoilers. There's a secret revealed very early on, Dr. Hyena, Hinneler, or whatever his name is, that he was friends with their mentor, who is Japanese George Costanza, and he disappeared into the dimension of the bad guys, the Neji whatever, a long time ago. And that's revealed like a quarter into the series, maybe a little earlier, and then it's like never mentioned again. They might have touched on it briefly, but it was never really important for a really long time. I think for like 20 plus episodes until like maybe the last quarter, and then in the last episodes. That could have been something that could have been interesting to play out through the whole series, but it was revealed fairly quickly and then never really taken advantage of until a point where he found out about it. Japanese George found out about it, and they found out who he was, and then at the very end, And something that Aerosol, if you watch my videos or anything, you know who Aerosol is, brought up is that with the last episode, they also pulled a bit of a Bandora in which they reveal his motivation at the last second, and I felt it was even more sudden than Bandora's. I think Bandora's was revealed within the last 3 episodes or 2, but his motivation was practically revealed in the last episode. It was like the cliffhanger to the second to the last one, in which it was discovered that his research had something to do with his daughter, and she ended up dying, and he was vengeful because his research was not appreciated as opposed to Japanese George's research about the Megaranger suits was. So, but that was literally laid out in the last episode. There was a cliffhanger at the end of the second to last in the penultimate episode where she called him father. One of the main villains that would have been around, so she's some sort of version of her. But that whole thing was literally revealed in the last episode, and a lot of the last few episodes deals around the Megarangers not being appreciated by the public, and Dr. Hindeler tries to relate that and saying, you know, like you, I wasn't appreciated, don't you understand? Which I felt was incredibly forced. It was one of those like last minute things where they decided to go for something in the last couple episodes, and I felt it was very forced. So, but, you know, other than those little grains, a lot of the story happened at the very end, and it was very boring, and like I said, by the time I got there, it was too little too late, so I really didn't find it that engaging. I know there's a lot of people that like more episodic stuff, but in particular with my Toku, I like a little bit more serialized stuff. I know that a lot of Sentai can be episodic, but a lot of them, you know, work in some of the plot into the episodic episodes. Like, I thought Kyoryuger and Go Busters did a good job of that, where they might have an episodic episode, but something would happen in it to further the plot, and I just like being invested in it. And it was just so boring. Which brings me to the characters, which I also found to be really boring. The main 5 Rangers were so interchangeable and basic. I mean, they all technically had their own unique personality traits, but they never really stood out for me and separated themselves from each other. In fact, a lot of the times I still got blue and black confused. I mean, they were just so basic, and I feel like they rarely got much focus. I mean, they had episodes that revolved around them, but I felt like we never really got to know them that well or saw any change in them. I mean, Red was a pretty generic, stereotypical sort of crazy Sentai Red. You got Black sort of being the responsible one, and then Blue, he always felt like just another responsible one. He was kind of dedicated to his goals, and he didn't feel that different from Black. And to be honest, the girls didn't feel that different to me either, and they just all kind of blended together in this boring blob of Megaranger, and so that didn't help when I was watching the show, and I didn't care about any of the characters, and I just felt they were so interchangeable. Mega Silver, on the other hand, I really enjoyed. He wasn't in the show very often at all, which is something interesting to see when you watch old Sentai. The only ones we've watched so far that have had 6 Rangers is this and Dairanger, in which case both of the 6 Rangers were sort of weaned, which is just kind of funny considering how important they become now, and they're, you know, part of the main cast after they show up. But I liked him because he actually had a bit of a personality. He wasn't the greatest 6 Ranger ever or anything, but he had a distinct sort of entertaining personality that made him stand out. I enjoyed him when he was around. The majority of the episodes he was involved in I enjoyed. So I liked Mega Silver, maybe even a smidge more than Zane, because I really didn't care for Zane. But I liked Mega Silver okay. I feel like he was kind of underutilized. But yeah, that was that. I liked him above the others because he had a personality, and I feel like the others really didn't. As for everyone else, Japanese George was entertaining because it looked like a Japanese version of George Costanza. There really wasn't that many other people. There was a mechanic guy whose name I don't know that always wore an orange hat, so I'm doing it Joy Wheeler style. I really don't have too much to say about him. My favorite character was, don't take offense to the way I phrase this, but the black guy that worked at the Megaship was hilarious because he's one of those characters where he can speak English, but you know, he speaks Japanese, and he makes, like, they always make Americans sound like our tongues were swollen. And it was just really entertaining to watch them speak. There was one lady, like, in the very beginning that was like, yes, we did it together, everyone with teamwork. She was never seen again. I assume she was fired for saying that. But they were the most entertaining people to me when they showed up, just the way they spoke. And the villains were honestly pretty boring. The backstory for Dr. Hindeler about, you know, him being a former friend of Japanese George is a pretty, you know, generic one. It's one of those things done before, but it had a lot of potential to be at least interesting. There's a lot of times where I watch shows where they have a sort of basic plot that's been done before. That's kind of a stereotypical thing, but it still engages me depending on how they approach it, and I think there was a bit of a wasted opportunity with him. Just, you know, the two sides of it. I can't remember the villain chick who was sort of his daughter. She was a pretty generic villain chick, and the Uganda Japanese Ecliptor was pretty boring too. He was around for the majority of the series and sort of served as one of those foils for the Rangers, but compared to Ecliptor, he was really boring. They made Ecliptor kind of interesting with the whole astronomer relationship thing. I use my hands a lot. I just noticed that. But yeah, he really didn't do much. I mean, despite the fact that he was around and physically did stuff, he didn't really have much of a character other than being generic Sentai henchman or, you know, lieutenant or whatever. And then, oh, I can't even remember his name. This is how much I paid attention, but Japanese Darkonda wound up not being that important. So unimportant that when he died, I didn't even realize it. I was like, where did that dude go? So he was in it for a bit, but they also made Darkonda more interesting, because Darkonda was a bit more of a wild card. And spoiler alert, in Megaranger he didn't have multiple lives. So the villains were honestly pretty generic, sort of in a way reminding me of, you know, something like Jetman, where they were just sort of villains just to be there to be villains. Although maybe the Jetmans were a bit more interesting. But yeah, there wasn't much to say about them. One other thing I want to touch on, well, there's two things, but one other thing I want to touch on specifically about the show, before I get to a wrap-up, is the Denji Ranger arc, which is the Psycho Rangers here, which the Psycho Rangers is one of the more famous and popular arcs here. And honestly, the episodes actually played out fairly similar. Most of the episodes that revolved around their fights against the Psycho Rangers, or the Denji Rangers as they went down, played out almost identical. Which there wasn't very many identical episodes between Space and Megaranger, but I honestly just liked the Psycho Rangers better. I think it had to do with the fact that I liked the way it was presented with the Psycho Rangers a little bit better, and I cared about the characters in Space, and I was more invested in the show, so I think that has a lot to do with it, because the Denji Ranger arc probably was one of the strongest, but I just wasn't as entertained as I was by the Psycho Ranger arc. I'm a really weird Toku fan in the fact that when I watch the Sentai, I don't ditch. There's a lot of people that watch Sentai, they're like, oh my god, I see why this is so much better. They showed blood and it's so mature for adults, it's so good, Power Ranger sucks. But I actually wind up having more respect for the Power Ranger show, and in a lot of cases actually like it better. So this was one of the cases. I like the Psycho Rangers a lot better than the Denji Rangers. You know, a lot of people, there's some people say the Psycho Rangers are overrated, but they kind of are the best evil Rangers, aren't they? I mean, I'm not talking about like evil Rangers like Green Ranger or the White Dino Ranger or like Titanium, where it's like a guy that later joins or something. I'm talking about like a negative version. There really hasn't been much competition. There was like the crappy Rangers that Zed made that had like burglar masks on, and then there was like the robot Lightspeed Rangers. And I think Turbo had like a shadow, they're like shadows or something. But honestly, the Psycho Rangers didn't have amazing characters, but I thought they were the most menacing and kind of cool looking negative Rangers. But that's more about Space than anything. And the last thing I want to touch on isn't necessarily about Megaranger so much, except it is. Very confusing. Is I want to tie it back to something. It's a little mini rant of people this year, in particular, have been complaining about Super Megaforce with the gestures of the Sentai actors. You know, the personalities of the Gokaiger characters being slightly different than the Megaforce ones. So people are really nitpicking, you know, Gokai Green's movements and how it will match up with Jake, or Noah's seriousness, even though Noah was always kind of a calm fighter. And I love how people, feel like this year have nitpicked it more than any other year, because when you watch Mega Ranger, I remember that Kenta does have that sort of crazy red personality, like I mentioned, and he has a lot of over-the-top movements. Like, he talks like this with his hands, like I was. We have to be more crazy. And when you watch in Space, you'll notice a few of those. But honestly, it doesn't make that big of a difference in the grand scheme. I've watched Space several times from when I was a kid up until now, and it's not that big of a deal. So I thought about them watching it, I'm like, we've had to deal with this all the time. I don't know why we're bringing it up this year all of a sudden. But anyway, that's beside the point. So overall, I've been talking for a bit now. Just to wrap it up, honestly, I did not care for Megaranger. It's probably my second least favorite Sentai. I didn't find it to be as intolerable as Dairanger. Like I said, it was just kind of boring. Honestly, it just didn't entertain me. I didn't care for the characters. The story really wasn't there. It was just kind of there. It was such a generic Sentai. I mean, I honestly can't recommend it from my point of view, but there's a lot of people that don't share my point of view. There was lots of people in the comments on the videos I watched of it that were like, oh my god, it's so much better. So I don't know. If you like it, let me know in the comments. I encourage that on these videos. Let me know in the comments, do you agree with something I said? Do you have a counter argument? Do you love Megaranger so much you have to talk about it? Let me know. I'm curious to know. But honestly, I really didn't care for it. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. was pretty boring. Not sure what's up next. Like I said, trying to do the Dairanger video before the next thing. We are hoping to watch Ranger, but it's just this shy from being done, so we might watch something for fun in between. I just realized I also plan on doing a Lightspeed Ramble video because I rewatched it like last year. That might still happen. But so look out for Dairanger in relation to Dosm's Rambles or anything else that might pop up. But so yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and check out the crazy podcast at writersrangersrambles.com. Till next time, it's Dosm Writer, signing out.